Norwegian art refers to the visual arts produced in Norway by Norwegian artists. For much of its history, Norwegian art is usually considered as part of the wider Nordic art of Scandinavia. It has, especially since about 1100, been strongly influenced by wider trends in European art. After World War II, the influence of the United States strengthened substantially. Due to generous art subsidies, contemporary Norwegian art has a big production per capita, though usually not especially a major center for art production or exporter of art. Norway has been relatively successful in keeping its art, in particular, the relatively mild nature of the Norwegian Reformation, and the lack of subsequent extensive rebuilding and redecoration of churches, has meant that, with other Scandinavian countries, Norway has unusually rich survivals of medieval church paintings and fittings. One period when Nordic art exerted a strong influence over the rest of Northern Europe was in Viking art, and there are many survivals, both in stone monuments left untouched around the countryside, and objects excavated in modern times. The Reformation and the loss of a permanent royal court after the Kalmar Union of 1397 greatly disrupted Norwegian artistic traditions, and left the existing body of painters and sculptors without large markets. The requirements of the small aristocratic class were mainly for portraits, usually by imported artists, and it was not until the 19th century that significant numbers of Norwegians were trained in contemporary styles. Norwegian art came into its own in the 19th century, especially with the early landscape painters. Until that time, the art scene in Norway had been dominated by imports from Germany and Holland and by the influence of Danish rule, initially with landscape painting, later with Impressionism and Realism. Though for the rest of the world Edvard Munch is certainly Norway's great artistic figure, there have been many other significant figures. The beginnings. Johan Christian Dahl is often said to be the father of Norwegian landscape painting. After a period in Copenhagen, he joined the Dresden school, to which he made an important contribution. He eventually returned to paint the landscapes of Western Norway, defining Norwegian painting for the first time. Another important early contributor was Johannes Flintoe, a Danish-Norwegian painter, known for his Norwegian landscapes and paintings of folk costumes. He taught at the School of Drawing in Kristiania from 1819 to 1851, where his students included budding romanticists such as Hans Gude and Johan F. Eckersberg. Adolf Tiedemann studied in Copenhagen in Italy and finally in Düsseldorf, where he settled. He often returned to Norway, where he painted the old Norwegian farm culture. His best-known painting is the Bridal Procession in Hardanger and Haugenern, painted in 1852. Norway's newfound independence from Denmark encouraged painters to develop the Norwegian identity, especially with landscape painting by artists such as Kitty Kjelland (1843–1914), an early female painter who studied under Gude and Harriet Backer (1845–1932), another pioneer among female artists influenced by Impressionism. Impressionists and Neo-Romanticists. Fritz Thaulow (1847–1906), an Impressionist, was initially a student of Hans Gude. He was later influenced by the art scene in Paris, where he developed Impressionist talents. Returning to Norway in 1880, he became one of the leading figures on the Norwegian art scene, together with Christian Krogh and Erik Wernskjold. Christian Krogh (1852–1925), a realist painter, was also influenced by the Paris scene. He is remembered for his paintings of prostitutes, which caused something of a scandal. Thorolf Holmboe studied under Hans Gude in Berlin between 1886 and 1887, and Fernand Corman in Paris between 1889 and 1891. He was inspired by many different styles at different points in his career, including naturalism, neo-romanticism, realism and impressionism. Nikolai Astrup grew up in Jølster in the west of Norway. After studying art in Oslo and spending some time in Paris and in Germany, he returned to Jølster where he specialized in painting neo-romantic landscapes with clear, strong colors. He is remembered as one of the greatest Norwegian artists from the early 20th century. Lars Hertevig from Tysvær in southwestern Norway painted semi-fantastical works inspired by the coastal landscape in Ryfylke. Hertevig completed a number of works on paper using aquarelles and often making the paper base himself from scraps of discarded pieces of paper. The art museum under the main museum, Stavanger Museum in Stavanger, Rogaland, has the most significant collection of works by Hertevig in Norway. Harald Solberg, a neo-romanticist, is remembered for his paintings of Røros and the Norwegian national painting, Winter's Night in Rondane. Edvard Munch. Perhaps Norway's most famous artist is Edvard Munch, a symbolist, expressionist painter who became world famous for the scream, which is said to represent the anxiety of modern man. Painted in 1893, the scream is Munch's most famous work and one of the most recognizable paintings in all art. It has been widely interpreted as representing the universal anxiety of modern man. With this painting, Munch met his stated goal of the study of the soul, that is to say, the study of my own self. Other names. Other noteworthy 19th-century painters are August Capellan, Peder Balk, Peter Nikolai Arbo, Elif Petersen, Gustav Ventzel, Oscar Wergeland, Erik Wernskjold, Aston Oregard, Amaldus Nielsen, Oda Krogh, Fritz Thalo, Carl Sund Hansen, Christian Skredsvig, Gunnar Berg, Halfdan Egidius, Theodor Kittelsen, Harald Solberg. Noteworthy artists from 20th-century Norwegian art are Harald Solberg, Reidar Ali, Per Krogh, Arnt Eklund, Kai F. Gjell, Jacob Weidmann, Hakan Blikken, Jens Johannessen, Ludvig Karsten, Henrik Sorensen, Kjartan Slotmark, Anna Riva Bergman, Anders Kjaer, Sven Johansson, Sven Bowling, Bjorn Carlsen, Bjorn Ransve, Kartivata, Frans Weiderberg, Odd Nerdrum, Ida Laurentsen, P. Knut Rose, Ornulf Opdal, Havard Vikagen, Leonard Rickard, Hakan Gulvag, Kira Wager, Halvard Storm, Lars Elling, Vibeke Babel Slingstad. 19th-century sculptors include Stefan Sinding, Gunnar Utzand, Brian Julf Bergslien and Matthias Skabrock. 20th-century sculptors include Gustav Vigeland, Nils Aas, Arnold Haukeland, Bard Breivik, and Grimdalen, Christopher Liedel, Perpal Storm, Nina Sundby, Dia Vaa and Wilhelm Rasmussen. In textile art, Hannah Reigen holds a unique position. Frida Hansen was an Art Nouveau textile artist.